Hi, this is Richard Chamberlain, and welcome back to the Protecting Your Family's Future podcast. This is episode number 62. Today, we're going to be talking about why people use asset protection trusts. So, this issue comes up because clients come to us and they're concerned about the possibility of losing their assets either to a frivolous lawsuit, claims, or a long term care spend down if they need to go into a long term care facility and they want to protect their assets. The way to do that really is to not own the assets. That sounds pretty harsh, but really, under the law, if you have access to assets, then your creditors can make you use those assets to pay your legitimate bills. So if it's a claim that's been established in a lawsuit, if it's for medical expenses or long-term care expenses, if you have those assets, they need to be used to pay your bills. So not owning the assets is the way to protect your assets from those potential claims. So there are really two ways to not own your assets. Number one, you can give them away to your children. That has some issues. We'll talk about those in a second. Or you can establish an asset protection trust and give those assets to that trust. That's going to be the preferred way to do it for a lot of reasons, and we'll get into those today. So if you give your assets away to your children, certainly that is the easier way to do things. It's less expensive. You don't need to see a lawyer and set up any kind of legal documents to do that. You can just turn over an account to them. You can deed your house over to them. But when you do that, you are at that point exposing those assets to their creditors, to their potential creditors, to their spouse. If they would get divorced, then their soon-to-be ex-spouse could claim their portion of those assets as part of the division of the marital property. So you don't want to have your assets owned by your children. That subjects those assets to the same risk that they would be subjected to if they were in your name. So the other alternative is to set up an asset protection trust. Now, we've talked about irrevocable trusts before. That's what these are. They're specifically designed to protect your assets from your potential creditors. So if you put your assets into an asset protection trust, you're essentially giving them away. You're giving up control of the assets. You're giving up the ability to get the assets back. And because you have given the assets away to this irrevocable trust, you don't own them. You can't get them back. So your creditors can't say, well, you need to pay your bills and you need to use the assets that are in that trust to pay your bills, because you don't have the right to have those assets anymore. So having the assets in that trust protects your assets from your creditors. In addition, by using the trust, the assets are not subject to the creditors or the spouse of your children. The assets don't belong to them. They might be the trustee of that trust, but they don't have the right to just get into the assets and use them any way they want. The trust instructs them how to use those assets. And so the assets are not subject to the claims of your children. If they would get divorced, their spouse cannot take part of the assets. So having the asset protection trust will protect your assets from your creditors, your potential creditors, from a long-term care spend down, and also from the creditors and spouses of your children. So that's why people use asset protection trusts. They're a very powerful tool. They're used in a lot of situations with a lot of different types of assets that might be put into those kinds of trusts. We'll talk about those over the next coming weeks. So I hope that's helpful for you today in understanding why an asset protection trust might be useful for you. If you have questions about that and you'd like to talk to one of us, you can reach out to us. The contact information is in the show notes, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks.